Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the Mom on the Verge podcast, where I aim to help you improve your sense of joy, purpose, and meaning in this life. We will talk about a lot of different ways we can do this, but ultimately, we'll be working toward finding our way back home to ourselves and remembering that even in the most challenging times, peace is only a breath away. I am your host, Katie Farinas, a mom, nurse, and yogi on a mission to improve mental health and build community in our world. Hello, everyone. I'm really excited for you to hear this conversation that I'm about to have with Alyssa Booth. She is a clinical therapist, a licensed clinical therapist who has worked with patients with eating disorders for many years. But she has realized throughout her career and her life how many people don't technically qualify as having an eating disorder, but they're disordered in their either way of eating or thinking about food or thinking about their bodies. And so she's become passionate with helping that population as well. I think it's really pervasive in our society, and we talk about that, how we judge ourselves and each other on our bodies, how we comment on other people's bodies, what we think, the automatic thoughts that come into our minds when we see someone with a certain body type and the certain kind of preconceived notions we have about that person based on their body type. As a yoga teacher, I can tell you that it's amazing to have those notions really like shattered when you see certain people coming in looking so fit, and yet they really can't do a lot of what is in class, or they're struggling to do what we're offering in class, and maybe somebody else coming in not looking nearly as fit and just being able to perform at a different level than you would have expected them based on just looking at their bodies. And so I just think we have a really, many of us have an unhealthy relationship with food, weight, and our bodies. And I'm including myself in that category. I share my story. You'll hear my story on this episode, but it's something that I have struggled with my entire life. And I'm still currently struggling with it as I go into the perimenopause years, where your body just becomes a whole new body, a whole different body than you ever had before. It doesn't work the same. It doesn't look the same. It doesn't respond the same. And that's been a practice. I do the episodes on the yamas and niyamas, and one of the yamas is non-possessiveness, or not becoming attached really to certain things. And I have certainly recognized my attachment to my body as it was. And it's a work in progress releasing that attachment. And so I think this is a great episode. We also talk about kids and how it really impacts our kids, and not just our girls, but also our boys. And Alyssa gives us some statistics on how it affects boys and men. And although the numbers are not as high as in females, they're still pretty high and concerning. And I see evidence of it all around me in my personal life. So I know it's out there, and it's something that we really need to be mindful of. And hopefully, once we become aware of some of the things in our culture that are contributing to these issues, that we can start making changes in our own families that will help the collective move towards a much healthier relationship with food and their bodies. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I would love to hear what you think, as always, and I will talk to you at the end. Hi, Alyssa. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Of course. We were just chatting offline right before we started recording, and I was saying how I have a running list of topics that I know I want to find experts in and address on my show. And the topic we're about to cover today was actually not on the list, but I found you through a podcast collaboration group that we're both in. And as soon as I saw what you focus on, I was like, oh my God, we absolutely, how could this have not been on my list? This is absolutely something we have to talk about, which is like our relationship with our weight, right, in our bodies. So I think it's something that I know I have personally been dealing with since childhood. And I would say most of the women that I know would say the same thing. And also, I am learning, I didn't think this when I was younger, but I'm now discovering that it's really an issue for men and boys as well. And even my own son, I know he struggles in that area. So I think this is great. I think we're going to cover a lot of ground. And maybe if we could get into like, how we can help our kids and how we can help ourselves, that would be fantastic. But I don't think you come to do this work without having your own journey on this path. So can you tell us about your history?
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't think that we realize how much we struggle until someone kind of points it out,
Hmm.
and so my clinical work is in eating disorders, like full-blown diagnosed eating disorders. And I often work with clients who are either going into or coming out of treatment centers and higher levels of care. And it wasn't until I was in college that I even realized how many people struggle with this. And it really does start with how we view ourselves, right? And maybe not even our body, but just how we view ourselves as a person, as who we are, and as how we are. So I was always a very shy kid, which if you know me in my real life now, you're probably like, wow, that's crazy that you used to be so shy. But I did. I was really shy. I was really insecure. I was very intimidated by other people. I have an older sister who's a couple years older than me, and I always felt like she was better than me and prettier than me and more popular than me, just like all of the
Hmm.
things.
Hmm.
So I kind of always felt less than for many reasons in lots of different ways. Um, and I will say that I did grow up within privilege, which means that I don't live in a body, and I have never lived in a body that is marginalized or called a disease, or that there's a lot of weight stigma and fat phobia. Um, but if you lived through the early 2000s and the 90s, I mean, it was brutal. So I was very aware of my body and wanting to like maintain a smaller body subconsciously. So even though I didn't necessarily have to work for that particular body type, I knew it was ingrained in my head. I knew, I guess, quote unquote, that if my body had changed, that would be a bad thing, right? A quote unquote bad
Hmm.
thing. So,
Hmm.
then come college, my body inevitably changes because I'm growing into an adult woman, as we should.
Hmm.
And I was in dance in high school. So again, I was always just kind of in this thin privileged space where I didn't really have to like worry about my body. But then in college, I was obviously not dancing as much as I was. And so my body changed. This is very true for high school athletes who maybe don't continue to pursue athletics to that degree in college, and bodies change. That's something that I say all the time. If you're a person in a body with a body, it is going to change at various stages of your life. And so I struggled with feeling and believing that I was fat, and I 100% was not. But we have such a hyper focus on weight kind of being this end all be all.
Hmm.
And so I struggled with that. And looking back, I'm just like, that is so silly because my body was like totally fine, just doing what it was supposed to do as I, again, kind of got older. And then, throughout the years, I've had two kids. I had one when I was in my early 20s, and I have an almost 2-year old. And so my body has changed. Things have happened, and luckily I'm in a better space about how I am and what I look like now. I don't necessarily care. But, I feel like it's kind of like a roller coaster of a journey. And I've done, some dieting. This is like one of my most embarrassing moments, but do you remember like the special K diet where it's basically just eating cereal? Like it was basically just eating
No.
like Special K cereal.
Oh my
And I was
gosh.
like, this is perfect. Like I love cereal, you know, and you know
Yeah.
what I mean? So it's just like doing things like that that it's like, why? Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
So because my work is in, or my clinical work, like I said, is in eating disorders, a huge question that I get all of the time is if I ever had an eating disorder. And I did not. I kind of dabbled in dieting and, you know, again, just like
Mhm.
feeling insecure about my body and insecure in multiple different ways that, again, don't necessarily only include, it's not limited to just my body,
Right,
right?
right. Mhm.
But yeah, I think we don't realize how disordered, whether it be our behaviors are or just like our thinking is around food and body. It's like a fish swimming in water. You don't realize you're in water until someone tells you, "Hey, you're in water," and like points it
Yeah.
out to you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is so pervasive in our
Mm.
culture. And um, there's a certain, there's a certain look that's the right look to have. And you feel like if you don't have that look, or you can feel if you don't have that look, that there's something wrong with you. And that look also changes. So you talk about, if you have a body, your body changes. Well, when you were, in the early 2000s or the 90s, I think the look was very, very thin, small hips, small bottom, like all that kind of stuff was what was considered the most beautiful body. Well, now it's more of like, a larger bum. Like people are paying to have
Mhm.
surgery, to have implants in their bottom, and larger hips, and now that's considered to be a beautiful body. So it's like we're trying to keep up with a changing cultural expectation that is literally impossible because we were given the body that we were given, and it's going to be what it's going to be. But when you're unaware of how much it's influencing your self-esteem and your self-worth, you can try to be chasing that. And so I will give the listeners my story, which was that when I was young, when I was a young child, I became very overweight. And I loved junk food. Let's just be honest. I mean, I had two working, full-time working parents who were really working their butts off. So I wasn't overly supervised when it came to eating. And I would come home from school and eat sleeves of Oreos and, all kinds of things. I was really always had a sweet tooth, and I became very overweight, and I was very uncomfortable in my body. I didn't like the way my clothes felt on me. I didn't like the way I looked in the mirror. I remember I was a big, I loved to go to the pool in the summer when I was a kid, and we belonged to a swim club. And I remember standing on the steps of the pool, kind of like gradually making my way into the cold water. And a girl that I had known from school who hadn't seen me in a while, she was walking behind me with a friend and said, "Oh my God, is that Katie? She got so fat." And I was like a big moment for me because it just confirmed what I was feeling already. And now I had this external validation that what I was feeling was actually accurate. And so that went on for a really long time. There was a lot of emphasis on weight in my home, in my family, not to a dysfunctional degree, but weight and body size was mentioned on a consistent basis. And so I decided that I was going to diet and lose weight. And I did. And I did it in a healthful way. Like I never would say that I had an eating disorder. I didn't do any crazy diets where I only ate carrots or or I only ate, I started exercising more. I started choosing healthier foods. And I was young and my metabolism was great. And so I lost weight and was a size that I was very comfortable with. And but it never left me, right? It never left me, that like constant vigilance of how much do I weigh? Do I need to do something about my weight? Have I gained weight every month? You get your cycle and you get bloated and distended, and oh my gosh, have I gained weight, or is this going to go away after my period? I mean, my weight and body size has been on my mind consistently every single day since I was probably, I was 7 or 8. I mean, a young child. Um, and so fast forward, I had babies. I really did well after having, like, I never wanted to be like stick thin. I just wanted to feel comfortable in my clothes, comfortable that when I looked in the mirror, I liked the way I looked, that kind of thing. Although I always was comparing myself to others. I would always like, am I thinner than that person or heavier than that person? Or well, there's always this comparison going on, which is, of course, like the absolute death of happiness is comparison. Now we fast forward all the way to where I am now, which is my mid 40s. And let me tell you, things start changing. Things start really radically changing and they're totally out of your control. And it has really brought up a lot for me internally because I do not look the way I did even 5 years ago, despite no changes in diet and exercise. And so I'm a yoga teacher. And one of the yamas, there's these yamas and yamas, they're like the ethical tenets of yoga. One of them is like non-possessiveness or non-attachment. And it is making me realize like how attached I have been all my life to being looking a certain way. And like you said, if you're in a body, that body's going to change. And that there's a whole lot of acceptance that has to come with that. So it's just amazing how it just comes with you. Like no matter, I'm 45, like I should be over this, but yet here I am, not over it and still struggling with it.
Well, and like what are the assumptions that we make based on those experiences, right? Like go back to your 7-year-old self. You know, your parents are working a lot and like, you know, they love you, but maybe you're just kind of there to fend for yourself. And so you have to think about what was the emotional experience for you. And sometimes we do use food to fill a void. And when we're not taught coping skills, and this is no like hate to our parents, but they kind of grew up in a different time where like we didn't really talk about emotions, we didn't talk about coping skills, you know, they probably still are learning coping skills themselves. I know me, even as a therapist, like even as an adult, I'm still learning coping skills. So at that point in time, you were probably not taught about your emotions and how to take care of yourself and what to do when you're feeling a certain way and what to do when you're feeling lonely and sad and, you know, kind of like, well, my parents aren't here, but I know that they work, but like, you know, you kind of use your logic to override that emotional need for, you know, to have that kind of support from parents. And so when you're not taught how to cope, you go to the things that make you feel good, right? And a lot of times that is food. And we like food because, well, food is good. I mean, Oreos, come on. You know what I mean? Like food is good. It is good because it keeps us alive, right? All of the things that keep us alive and sustain us are meant to be good and feel good in our bodies and to our bodies. The other thing to think about too is like at 8-ish years old, I mean, and it kind of depends on when puberty started for you, but that's also a time when we start to see kids. I mean, I would even say, and my son as well, who's 12, kind of put on a little bit more weight because they're about to go through a huge growth spurt in adolescence. And so sometimes that might start at like 10 years old. Sometimes you might not really see that in some kids. I know for me, I like gained weight and then I kind of grew up a little bit. I mean, I guess in height, I'm not really that tall, but anyways, that's beside the point, right? So some kids grow out before they grow up. Some kids just like shoot up and go really tall. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of different genetic components with that as well. And then it's also the assumptions you make about what weight means to you and means about you. So the girls who were like, oh my gosh, like she's gained so much weight. It's like, okay, cool. And like, are you going to reduce me to my weight and my size? You can be mean to me because my body looks different. And that's where weight stigma is born, right?
Yeah.
That is the place that weight stigma is born, is that we think that we are, you know, I mean, gross, disgusting, unlovable. No one's going to want me. No one's going to want to hang out with me. I'm just going to be the fat friend, or I'm just going to, you know what I mean? Like we reduce ourselves to our bodies and create this narrative about what that says about who we are and how we are and how people are going to accept us and love us. And then we also see not only in, you know, in like media and the way that, you know, people in larger bodies are portrayed in media and, you know, the news and whatever, but also how people are treated in our closer circles. And then, you know, like you said, there was an emphasis on weight in your home. And so you're kind of putting together pieces of the puzzle of what that says to you. And you see people who are maybe thinner and fit the ideal beauty standard, getting the attention, getting the praise, getting the love, getting the boyfriend, getting the, getting all the
Mm-hmm.
things. And so you're like, oh, well, something must be wrong about me. And I need to change how I look so I can make other people feel more comfortable with how I am. And so I can get the love and validation and praise and belonging that I so desperately desire.
Yeah.
And the sad thing is that when people start to lose the weight, they do get more attention. They do
Mm-hmm.
get more praise.
Yes.
Before and after photos, oh my gosh, look at you. You look so great.
Yes.
You're so healthy. What are you doing? Teach me
Yeah.
your secrets. You know what I mean? So people are like, it is such a highly reinforced thing. And then what happens? You start going through, I would assume maybe perimenopause-ish is maybe where you're
Mm-hmm.
at. So
Yep.
your body's changing. And then you're like, oh my gosh, well, people are gonna see that my body's changed. And like, what does that say about me? Because I was praised so much in a thinner, more ideal, socially acceptable body, but no one's saying anything to me now. No one's telling me how great I am now because
Right.
I've gained weight.
Yeah. And I think it's the glasses we put on because I will look at someone, and I don't think I'm alone in this, who is thinner and think that that person looks more attractive because they are thinner. Or I will look at a picture of myself from when I was thinner and think I looked more attractive in that picture because I was thinner. But is that the cultural glasses that I have put on or the cultural wine that I have drank? Do you know what I mean? Like, is that my perception because, and many people's perception, because this is what the water we're swimming in, as you said?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, that is what we have conformed ourselves, to believe is beautiful. But the thing about that is, if you think about like your best friend or like loved ones and, who's maybe weight or physical appearance or whatever has changed, you don't love them less
Right. Or think that they're less attractive or
or think that
beautiful.
they're
Yeah.
less attractive or beautiful.
Right.
No, you
I,
don't think that about them. You don't think
yes.
like, oh gosh, well, I can't be friends with you anymore. Like, no, you don't. I mean,
Yes.
and if you do, then maybe we have other problems that we need to solve.
Right. Right. Right.
But you don't see people like that you love like that. And it's sad because yes, we do, even though we're not supposed to judge a book by its cover, we're conditioned to judge the book by its cover,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And I think that if we can see past that, um, we can see beauty in everybody. I've really been in an interesting space, just like in social media, because there's, like all of the trends now are like getting filler and getting Botox. And I'm not by no means saying don't do that. You are
Mhm.
completely autonomous, whatever you have the right to do, whatever you want to do with your body. But it's like we're all starting to kind of like all the features are kind of looking the same now,
Yeah.
where, all these young girls or like celebrities are all starting like this, all like everybody looks the exact same. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
all the people are looking the same. And I just think that it's so interesting when we see, and I'll talk about women, when we see women who are just them, like
Yeah.
just your face. Like I saw a video the other day that really spoke to me, and it was like this girl who had always struggled because she has like a bigger nose, right? And she was like, but this is my grandpa's nose. And this is my like
Oh,
this is like these features on my face represent
yes.
my family and my heritage and where I came from and my ancestors, and how cool are genetics that they've lasted, for however many years, right down the line,
Right.
and that I get to represent like my family in how I look and how I show
Yeah.
up. And she said she always wanted to get a nose job. Like it was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait until I can get a nose job. I can't wait until I can fix this and, not get made fun of and whatever.
Hmm.
And, she had a moment where she was able to just connect with her. And she was like, is it my number one favorite feature? Maybe not really, but I love it because it represents a huge part of who I am. And I just thought that was such a beautiful expression of, like features that again, maybe aren't like the ideal, realistic, or
Yeah.
whatever standard.
Hmm.
Um,
I love that. I think
yeah.
that's really beautiful. And she was able to step outside the cultural vortex, right? She was able to like step outside of what we were fed on a consistent basis and look at something from a different angle, and a really beautiful angle. That's a beautiful story. And I wish we could all do that more, including myself. I'm not leaving myself out of that out of that category. And these things. So you mentioned the Botox and the fillers and all that. So I am a nurse and I work on a unit that has a lot of what I consider to be young nurses. They're like in their 20s.
Mhm.
When my generation was in their 20s, we wouldn't, I mean, literally the word Botox was not part of our vocabulary. Like we just did not think
Mhm.
about doing things like that. We didn't even put, my daughter jokes because she's 15, but she's had like a skincare routine since she was probably 12. And I'm like, I didn't even start putting lotion on my face until I was 35. Like, I mean, nothing, right? And these what I consider to be very young girls who are beautiful and perfect exactly the way they are starting to get Botox at this age. So it's like we're going in the wrong direction, is what I feel like. I feel like we are, as much as has been a problem for I don't know how long, but at least my lifetime, probably way before that. It's getting almost more intensified that people feel like they have to start doing stuff to look quote unquote better at a younger and a younger age. My daughter really struggled with her weight when she was younger. She actually wound up having an eating disorder when she got a little bit older. Thank God she's doing well now. But I remember at the age of like 7 and 8, her saying to me, even maybe 6, I don't understand. Neither my husband and I are small people. Like my husband is like super broad, shoulders. He's 6 foot tall. He's just like a broad, big bone guy. And I was never a tiny person either. So she just doesn't have the genetics to be a tiny person. But she would compare herself to all these girls in her class who were tiny girls, and come home and say, why don't I look like that? Why am I so different than that? And she got made fun of. And so what's happening? Like, how do we reverse this trend and go in the opposite direction?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, my son he's 12. He just turned 12. And the first time he was called fat was when he was 6. And I'm like, so to me, it starts at home. It starts with how we're talking about our bodies, how we talk about other people's bodies, what our kids are hearing about in those conversations. They are listening to us. So you can tell your daughter, you're so beautiful the way you are, like there's more to you than your body, blah, blah, blah. But then if you're turning around being like, oh, like I hate these rolls, or I just need to lose a little bit of weight, or oh my gosh, like my legs are just, I'm so flabby, I'm so flat. You know what I mean? Like if you're turning around and saying all of these things about yourself, she can overhear that. She's
Mm-hmm.
listening. And I think that's true for other people, right? So like my son was at a soccer camp, and the last day they did like a slip and slide or whatever. So like all the kids were like in their swimsuits, and someone turned around and told him, he was like, "You're fat." And I mean, it's interesting because Landon isn't like, he was never what I would consider to be like a fat kid. And he came home and he was very upset about it. And so we had to have this whole conversation. I was like, I mean, you're not. I was like, but even if you were, like, who cares? Like, you are a growing child. You're healthy. You take care of your body. You eat well. I mean, you could probably drink some more water, but I mean, other than that, like, you're you're good, healthy, socially healthy. You're doing well in school. I mean, you play soccer, you're athletic, like all of these different things. I said, so that's what's important about
Yeah,
who you are. Like your
yeah.
body's going to change. You're not going to look like this for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't matter. And I said, and the people who are telling you things like that are hearing it at home and making assumptions that that's a bad thing, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that 6-year-olds really understand what that means until we tell them, right? Just like you maybe didn't realize your body was the size that it was when you were younger until someone told you, and you're like, oh, okay, well, maybe I am. Well, maybe this is a
Mm-hmm.
bad thing, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so there's a moment in a kid's life where we start to become very aware of how we look.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it's hard because I feel like, especially in my line of work, I feel like I am constantly going against what everybody is saying in society, and, like going on these crazy diets or detoxes, or, just like in this yo-yo spiral. And I'm like, y'all, this is not, this
Yeah.
isn't how we do it. But it is so incredibly normalized. And that is something that I've had to have conversations with my son about. Is like, look, there's going to be like, this is what diet talk sounds like. People might say certain things about bodies, but we're not participating, we're
Yeah.
not participating in that. We're taking care of ourselves the way that feels good, that isn't excessive. And, and I tell him all the time, 'cause he still plays soccer. I'm like, you're really fast. Like, you're fast, you're good.
Hmm.
Again, like, all the things about you are fine. You don't need to change
Right.
anything, so, but it is hard when you have comparisons, and when you have social media, and um when things like Botox and filler are being used as like preventative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're hitting on, it's so true, is that because, because I had the struggles that I did, I was very intentional about how I came to food and weight and all that with my kids. And my point is, it's so soaked into the culture because I made everything about health. We make choices that are healthy for our bodies, right? We eat the foods we eat because they are healthy for our bodies. It's okay to have sweets. We just don't want it to be like the primary part of our diet because it's not healthy for our bodies. We move our bodies because it's healthy for our bodies. Like we like all of these things. And I never said anything negative about my own body. At the time, I was honestly fine with my own body, like as I was raising them. But it didn't matter. It didn't matter what I said, and when she came home complaining that, she was different than her peers and her peers had said things, and I had tons of conversations with her about that. It was so normalized in most of the culture that it was getting to her anyway,
Yeah.
despite all of my efforts at home. And so that is where I think, the struggle comes in for parents and for us as just, even adults, is
Mhm.
this people um feeling like it's okay to comment about other people's bodies or comment on other people's bodies ever. Like it's never okay to do that, in my opinion. I even don't love telling someone they look great when they've lost a lot of weight because it just, again, like you're saying, it's that positive reinforcement. Do you feel good? Is your blood pressure better? Is your cholesterol better? Like, are you healthier? Like, that's awesome. Most importantly, do you feel better? But this like commenting on other people's bodies is very normalized, like you said. And I think it's so pervasive. It's like the air we breathe. It's hard to escape it.
Yeah, no, totally. And I'm right there with you. I don't comment on other people's bodies. And I don't partake in like the before and after picture thing, because there's nothing wrong with like wanting to build muscle and being proud that your body composition has changed, because that's a goal that you've been working on. And like, I love that for you, but I also don't only love you for that reason. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like that's not like, I'm glad that you achieved your goal, but like if your body changes, like I still think that you're amazing and great exactly how you are. And I agree with you. It does feed into that you're a better person and you're more likable if you look a certain way. Um, and it's hard because we have really associated health with weight,
Mm-hmm.
right? If
Yeah.
you lose weight, you're automatically healthy. And that's not true. And I know that because I've worked in eating disorder treatment centers, and I have seen people in all kinds of bodies be anorexic. And okay, so here's a statistic that I do know off the top of my head. I'm like, I know some, um, that only 6% of people who are anorexic actually meet the criteria for being in the lower BMI. Most people, and so it's called, which I
Wow.
think is so dumb, but in the DSM, it's called atypical anorexia. And a lot of people in larger bodies are not diagnosed with a serious mental health disorder that is the number two um it's the number two killer in mental health disorders aside from like opiate use. People die from eating disorders every single day. And
Wow.
people who are in larger bodies are not diagnosed because the doctor says, good job. You're doing so great. You lost, 50 pounds in 2 weeks. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wonderful. You know what I mean? And so it's really sad because by the time they come to me or they get to treatment, it's like, oh my gosh, this has been going on for so long and no one
Yeah.
has said anything. No one has said anything to you. You never know why someone is losing weight if it's
Hmm.
in a healthy way. I've worked with clients who have been like health coaches and whatever, and they're promoting all of these things, but in the background they're like binge eating and feeling really out of control, or you know what I mean? And so you just never know what someone is struggling with.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hard part, is that we have been culturally ingrained to believe that if you're losing weight and if you're in a smaller body, that automatically equates to health.
Yeah. And it does not. Yeah. That's so true. That's so true. I that's like so scary that I did not realize that it's like the number two reason for death from a mental health disorder. That is wild and so scary. Do you know if those statistics are changing? Like are like over time has it jumped up in the category or remained
Yeah, it,
stable?
it has. I mean, I think that there's so many health complications. I would say so as, I mean, obviously aside from like death, which is horrible, there's so many other health complications that come with eating disorders and chronic dieting that can lead to
Mm,
like further health issues. You know what I mean? And so yeah, I think that we are not focusing on the impact that this has on people's lives,
yeah,
the negative health impact.
yeah. And even if you don't classify as having an eating disorder, like I absolutely did not have an eating disorder, but it has had a negative impact on my life
Yeah.
because I've spent my whole life worried about it, thinking about it, comparing myself to others, uh, putting like a part of my value as a woman, particularly on how I looked, right? Because women are objectified a lot, right? They are, there's a lot of talk about women's bodies.
Yes.
And this is not, we talked and we can get into some statistics because we talked before we started recording that this is not just a female issue, that it absolutely is in men as well and boys. And I think it's more prevalent than I personally ever realized in men and boys. But I know for sure with women, our bodies are very, what's the word I'm looking for? That's another thing with perimenopause that's awesome is word loss. Like they just leave. Maybe they'll return, maybe they won't. Like they're criticized, I guess is the word I'm looking for. So their bodies are very, criticized and looked at for breast size and bust size and, waist size and thigh size and, all of these things that have nothing to do with who we are as a person or our value or what we can offer this world. And so I think it does so much damage, even if you don't fall into the category of a true eating disorder.
Absolutely. So I've been a licensed therapist for about 10 years now. And like I said, my clinical work has been in eating disorders, trauma, anxiety. Those are kind of like my big three areas that I work on in there. And recently I've started getting into coaching. And so this is for women who, like you, don't fall necessarily into like, I have a clinical eating disorder, but it's disordered,
Mhm.
but it's messing with me. But, I still, feel a certain way or have these thoughts or, struggle with like feeling good in my body or, fearing certain foods or, thinking about food all of the time. You know what I mean? So falling into that like disordered category where it's having that negative impact on your life. And I think to me, that's where most people are falling.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and of course,
Mhm.
yes, there's too many people that have eating disorders. But I think that people don't realize, like, it's like, oh, well, I'm just being healthy. And I'm like, you're just like a couple of behaviors away from like having a diagnosis here. You know what I mean? Like you're like you're right there. Or you're doing things that like I work on, with my clients who do have eating disorders, like so there's definitely some disordered behavior in there around food and body. But unfortunately, it's normalized. Go on a 3-day fast. Like, no,
Yeah.
don't do that. That's
Right.
not don't do that, or do this detox. And I'm like, no, you're literally just going to have diarrhea. Like, unless your kidneys and liver is not functioning well, like, then you need to talk to your doctor about that, obviously. But like, you don't need to do a detox, right? Like, you don't need to do those things. I think that people are so desperate to like, quote unquote, be healthy that they're doing all of these unhealthy things that's creating more problems, but then they're blaming food, they're blaming their bodies. And I'm just like, no, this isn't.
Yeah, it's a very vicious cycle. It's a
It is.
vicious cycle. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the boys, because I think we did talk about your son in particular, but I think we've been focusing a lot on girls. So what are the statistics for boys? Like how many boys are struggling with their self-worth related to, their body size?
Yeah, let me look up the NIDA statistic. How prevalent?
Because that, like I said, is something that is coming up for my son. And I've had the same conversations I had with my daughter about, all that's important is that we're healthy, that we eat healthy foods that support our body, that we sleep well, that we, move our bodies for exercise, because it's important. Like if you only eat when you're hungry, you eat when you're hungry and you don't eat when you're not hungry. Like it's literally all you have to do. And when you eat mostly healthy food. But it doesn't stop the concern for him. I can see it. It doesn't make him feel settled or better. And it was surprising to me because, like I said, I felt like in the beginning of my parenthood journey, I really was very intentional about how I spoke about eating and food and body and all that stuff with my daughter. And they're 5 years apart, so he's only 10. But it was all the same messages for him, but I wasn't as like focused on it for him because I really was thinking about this as a female issue, but it's clearly not.
Yeah. So statistics that are here on the NIDA website, which is National Eating Disorder Association. So if we're looking at just body concerns, 37% of boys. And then if we're looking at eating disorder statistics, for males in general, I don't think that this isn't specifying age. It says about 20%, they make up 20% of people with anorexia, 30% of people with bulimia, and 43% of people with binge eating disorder.
Okay. So still smaller than females, but not small. I mean, those numbers are still concerning.
Yeah. Still there. And I think that for men, it's more about, it's shame in different ways, right? Because for men, it's almost like avoidance of being made fun. You don't want to be like the scrawny kid, or you don't want to be, like, again, like the fat Fred, right? So it's kind of like this weird, like, I don't know, weird place that we put guys. But on the other hand, dad bods are okay.
Right.
I'm like, women are the ones who carried the thing. Like, come on. Like, why? Like, we have to bounce back, but dad bods are cool. Along with dad sneakers. But mom jeans, it's like, what is happening?
I know. It is so unfair. It is so unfair. But, I do see men who are, dads and have their dad bods, but they're really unhappy that they have them. Like they don't feel there's enough. I know enough men in my own personal life who are self-conscious about their weight and their body and how they look. And they're not like, I'm sporting the dad bod and I'm totally fine with that. So there's still a message getting out there. You know what I mean? There's still a message. I don't know if it's about youth, because that's the other thing that comes in, like particularly at my stage where my body is definitely changing and there's just a lot happening. And it's that's about youth too, right? So I am transitioning into a different phase of my life, and it's saying something about my age and where I fall in this cultural hierarchy where youth is so valued, and age is not necessarily valued as much, which comes back to all the same things, right? Although unlovable, unworthy, unvaluable, all of those same messages that we receive.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we're talking about health and like what is healthy, I think that we need to be looking at it from multiple different aspects of health, right? Because if I say I'm going to get healthy, what do you immediately think of?
Weight loss, right?
Yeah,
Right. So
weight
losing the
loss,
weight.
diet, and exercise. I'm going
Mhm.
to clean up my diet and I'm going to start exercising more and I'm going to lose weight or
Mhm.
get tone or whatever we're going to call it, right? Um, but to me, health goes beyond that. Something that I say often is that mental health paves the way to physical health. One thing that I talk about a lot is stress, the impact of stress on our body
Mhm.
literally messes everything up in our body. Our gut function, there's all, and I'm not saying like don't have healthy gut, whatever, but I feel like we're like missing so much by just focusing on the food. It's like, well, don't eat this, don't eat that, don't eat past this time, don't do your cleanse, blah, 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 like colon cleanse, whatever. And it's like, but if we're like, what's the root of the problem?
Mhm.
Because I don't know about you, but I have anxiety and, that has caused issues with my gut function, no matter
Yeah.
what I eat, like
Mhm.
I will have issues. Um, and just kind of like how that impacts all areas of our body.
Yeah.
We have stress receptors on all of our major organs. So when we're stressed, when we have chronic stress, and when we're trying to be on a very rigid diet and we're stressing out about it, it's like canceling, it's almost like canceling
Right.
it out. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's like,
Right.
that's not healthy. Like your body is not going to absorb the nutrients, as many nutrients under chronic stress. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? So like, I feel like we're kind of like, is diet and exercise a factor? Of course. Yes. We don't want to negate that. But what are the other things going on? You know, I worked with clients who have been on such rigid diets that they don't eat their own birthday cake or
Oh
their
my
friend's
gosh.
birthday cake, or
Yeah.
because they're like, okay, well, like that's going to ruin my progress, or it's like not my cheat day, and I'm like, no, no, we're not doing that.
Mhm.
Or they don't want to go out to the pool with their friends because they're so embarrassed,
Mhm.
or they don't want to go on vacation, or they don't go to a certain restaurant because it doesn't have anything on the menu that is, up to their health standards, or they'll bring supplements and meal replacement shakes on vacation and pack like an entire luggage, you know what I mean, of
Mhm.
all of this stuff. And so you have to look at how this is impacting you, but we call it discipline, right? We call that
Mhm.
discipline. They're dedicated, they're just
Yeah.
disciplined, but we have to look at, is this impacting your mental health, your social health,
Mhm.
your financial health? How much money have you spent on all of these things, all of
Right.
these supplements, all of this stuff, you know? And to me, I think that yes, diet and exercise, but also just like having fun. Food should be connection. Yes,
Mhm.
eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full. But when someone brings in a sweet treat and I'm like, oh man, that looks so good. And it's your birthday and I want to celebrate with you. And you know what
Mhm.
I mean? Like that's connection.
Right. Right.
And it's not like we also have to remember that like our bodies want to work for us.
Mhm.
Our bodies really want to work for us. They
Mhm.
do such a great job of keeping us here and alive. And if you think about all that your body has done for you over the course of your life
Right.
and how you want to treat your body and show up for your body and like love your body, right? Like we want to be doing these things out of love for our bodies, not
Hmm.
because we hate them, not because we feel like not because we're at war with our bodies. You know what I mean?
Right. Yes, absolutely. It just reframes the whole picture, right? It reframes the whole picture of being healthy if we are doing it not from a place of um, restriction and shame and discipline, but from a place of love. That's a
Yeah,
whole other, it just changes the whole picture. Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. I'm
Yeah.
going on vacation very soon, which I'm very, very excited about. We're going to Hawaii. And I'm so excited to experience that culture. I've been before, so this will be my second time. And I'm really excited to experience the culture. I want to eat poke bowls every single day. I want to try all of the things. And if I so happen to gain weight, cool. I'm in
Right.
Hawaii. I'm at
Right.
the beach. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I'm in this beautiful place with people that I love, experiencing like the beach is my ultimate happy place. I have such an appreciation for like the culture and the people. I mean,
Mhm.
if I- and if I gain weight and if that's the thing that I'm worried about the whole trip,
Yeah.
that just puts a rain cloud over it, you know?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that, I mentioned earlier that I'm a huge sweets person. I always love sweets and I still love sweets, but I used to crave them more. And I could chalk that up to a physiological craving, but I actually don't think that it was. I think that as I've aged and I've done a lot of soul searching and a lot of work on myself and a lot of peeling back of layers, that needed to be removed, that I feel more centered and calm and peaceful and at home in myself. And those cravings went away. That desire to eat the junk food went away. And so, a lot of like you're saying, your body wants to work for you, but we have this body mind connection. And so, when we need to do the work up top, that will then influence what happens below, not just from a stress perspective, but even from a craving perspective or from a wanting or yearning perspective, or from a like, I'm doing this out of like self-deprecation versus love. Like it's everything changes when we work on our soul first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think we don't realize how much restriction plays a role in our relationship with food. So, not just physical restriction, right? Because we've all experienced whether you're intentionally restricting or if it's on accident and like time has just gotten away from you, you're like, oh my God, I'm so incredibly hungry. I just want to like eat a whole cow, right?
Right,
And we
right.
kind of overdo it a little bit. Like any kind of restriction, physical, and then we don't think about mental restriction. So you're a sweets person, but if you're like, oh yeah, I get to have, like I'm gonna go get some ice cream today and I'm gonna enjoy it and like that's gonna be really good. Or if you're like, oh my gosh, I really want ice cream, but like that's gonna be so bad for me and I can only have a little bit. Or maybe if I don't eat as much at dinner, then I can give myself a little bit more. You know what I mean? If you're playing
Mm-hmm.
this whole like mental gymnastics game in your head, like that's not going to be an enjoyable experience. And our
Right.
brain takes that information as like, this is bad, this is wrong, again,
Mm-hmm.
stress response coming in. And so it's not going to be a pleasurable experience. And same with
Mm-hmm.
like the emotional part. If we're emotionally restricting, if we're not, using coping skills, allowing ourselves to feel the emotions that we need to feel and work through them, then food might be our coping skill. And so we tend to blame like, I'm just a food addict or I'm a sugar addict or I just can't control myself, so I need to restrict more. And that's really the opposite of what you should be doing to heal that part of your relationship with food.
Right. Right. Well, this was wonderful. So we're coming up on time here. Do you have anything that like you want to impart to the audience, anything that they can do that, we didn't mention or you want to emphasize to just heal their relationship with their bodies or begin to heal, I should say. It's a big topic.
It, it
Begin
is
to heal.
it is a big topic. I think that I don't know. I feel like, okay, like that's a really big question. Like, how do I like
I
put all of this into like
right. I know. I put a big one at you.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I would say is that it's okay to return back to you. And I love how you kind of said that in your statement about like returning back home to yourself and learning to really trust your body and listen to your body and be at peace with your body and sit and think about what you're needing, what you're wanting, what's going to be good for your body. Um, I like to tell my clients to check in with themselves frequently throughout the day and just like, what am I needing? What am I feeling? What's the next best thing I can do for myself? And it doesn't have to be anything big. It can just be like, my back's uncomfortable. So I need to just kind of adjust myself and like feel good and do a little bit of stretching because I've been at the computer all day, and like it's in those small moments that we start to reconnect with our bodies and its needs. And it's a really good place to start.
Yeah, I love that. And I will reiterate it because I loved your statement on doing things out of love for your body and
Yes.
making every choice a choice out of love. We talk on the show a lot about like, parenting your inner child, and that's a piece of it, right? So like how, if you're making a choice, would you make that same choice for your own child? And if you
Yeah.
wouldn't, then it's probably not the right choice that you should be making for yourself either.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the work that you're doing. And I'm going to work on releasing my attachment to my old body and accepting this new version with love. All right. Have a wonderful day, Alyssa.
All right. Thank you. You
Bye
too.
bye.
Bye.
Okay, well, we covered a lot of ground there, but not enough ground. I had wanted to go over several more topics and looked at my phone and realized that there was only 10 minutes left in the interview. So we didn't get to cover as much as I had hoped we would, but I still think that we did cover a lot. And I'd love to know what you think. Do you recognize yourself in some of the things that we were talking about? Do you recognize it in your children? Is it an issue for you and or for your children that you are aware of? I can tell you that I was somewhat aware of my daughter's struggles, but definitely not entirely aware of everything that was going on with her. And so it can be a little bit scary when you think about it that way, that our kids can be struggling more than we recognize. So it's really important to have those conversations, the difficult conversations with our kids, but also really important for us to self reflect and have those difficult conversations with ourselves about how we feel and what we think and how our self worth is being impacted by how we feel about our bodies. So that would be my invitation for this week, would be to journal on that, to journal on your relationship with your body through the years, from childhood to adulthood, and how you think that relationship has impacted you. Have you been comfortable with your body and you feel you've been proud of your body and it hasn't really impacted the way you show up in the world? Or have you struggled with your weight and your image of yourself related to what your body looks like and how that has impacted other areas of your life and your relationships and what you chose to do or not do, risks that you would take, friendships? How has it impacted your life? Because until we become aware of how these things are impacting us, we can't let them go, right? We can't, that non attachment, we can't become unattached to something if we don't even know that it's impacting us. We have to shine the flashlight on it first, get super up close and personal with it, even if it's uncomfortable, and make a conscious choice as to how we want to proceed with that relationship. So that is my invitation to you this week. As always, there'll be more in my newsletter. If you're not signed up, please do sign up for that. You can find it in the show notes on my website or on my social media bios. And I will talk to you next week. Have a lovely, lovely rest of your week. Bye-bye. Hi, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode or any of our other episodes, I ask that you please like the show, follow, subscribe, or share. The way that podcasts work is the more people that do one of those things, the more likely it is that when someone's looking for a podcast to listen to, our show will pop up for them. I started this podcast because I really see there's a great need in our world for people to feel more peace, joy, love, and acceptance in their lives. And I think we can do that when we have a greater sense of self-awareness. We could become conscious creators of our own lives. And I'm seeking to do that for as many people as possible. So if you could help me by liking, sharing, or subscribing to the show, I'd really appreciate it. And hopefully someone hears a conversation that changes their life. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time. Much love.